Iran's new supreme leader is reshuffling the country's military leadership, and experts say the promotion of more than a half dozen hardliners to top security positions suggests a more complicated picture for the U.S. The shakeup coming as President Trump says the U.S. and Iran are semi-negotiating. Tehran says no talks are happening at all. Both sides are demanding compensation now as a precondition for talks. Iran is also calling for the withdrawal of all American troops from the region and the release of billions of dollars in frozen assets as a condition for reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Let's talk about this now with retired Army Major General Randy Manner. He's a former Deputy Commanding General of the U.S. Third Army in Kuwait. All right, General, what does the shakeup of the Iranian military leadership tell you? The supreme leader has purportedly named an IRGC veteran as national security chief and then elevated these 6 hardliners to top security positions.
It further complicates the entire situation and makes any kind of a reasonable solution to continue to be eluded by both sides. The Iranians know that they have the upper hand in terms of the bargaining position. It is my opinion this is going to harden their demands. And of course, we have our own president who is backtracking and now saying that he expects compensation. It is probably true that there are some limited negotiations ongoing, but quite frankly, they are probably not substantial. And so again, the world waits.
Yeah, I mean, so tell us where we are right now, because Trump says Hormuz is open, but actual shipping data indicates it very much is not. And Trump says the U.S. is low-keying negotiations with Iran. There's been relatively little military activity. Are we just seeing this in sort of a waiting game right now?
It's literally a waiting game. You have both sides who are refusing to move, and the Iranians are again in the upper hand. The whole idea that this is about nuclear materials we know to be a complete farce. The president himself said he destroyed that capability 2 wars ago. And the problem is the Iranians now have something much more powerful than a nuclear weapon. It's called, they now can control the strait at any point to eliminate, significantly reduce the oil that goes through there. I mean, there are estimates that this is costing the world somewhere between $1 trillion to $3 trillion. And of course, the American share about that is somewhere about $500 billion. It's shocking how much the negative impact has been on the world because of this venture of our president.
We also learned overnight about the secret plane switch by the president last month when he was flying out of Turkey for the NATO summit on an alternate military plane as part of an elaborate ruse that was prompted by an Iranian threat. What are the possibilities of the actual scope of that threat?
It's difficult to say. And why I say it in that way is because the Iranians would, on one side, perhaps want the Trump to be out of being the president. On the other hand, the Iranians also know that with Trump in, quite frankly, they're in significant control of the situation. So I think this, quite frankly, is propaganda on both sides. I think it's the Iranians doing saber rattling against the president. It's our president doing saber rattling against the Iranians. I think that the true amount of threat to the president probably is, quite frankly, pretty low. So again, it's so difficult to see or to understand how much you can really trust on either side about what they're saying in public.
Let's talk about how big this war is actually getting here. A Saudi-owned commercial vessel was reportedly struck by a missile while it was moving through the Bab al-Mandeb Strait in the Red Sea. The Iran-backed Houthis warned last month that they would target any Saudi ship transiting that strait. They've also claimed other recent attacks, various ones, on Saudi assets. Do you consider this another front in the war at this point? How do you see it?
It's an escalation of the situation in the Middle East. One other very striking development was that Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey signed a pact that an attack against any is an attack against all. The Israelis, in my opinion, this is backfiring on them because now they have 3 very powerful Muslim nations that are, quite frankly, united where they were not united previously. And one of them happens to have a nuclear weapon capability. So I think this is getting more and more difficult. It's getting more and more dangerous. in the Middle East, and quite frankly, in that entire hemisphere.
Well, we haven't learned enough about what the actual threat was, but certainly they thought it was credible enough to take these extraordinary steps. In reality, I think it may have been the smart move to do based on what information they had. But as Caitlin mentioned a moment ago, it's the decoy thing that bothers me a little bit. There is what's called the duty to warn. You can't use civilians as decoys without letting them know. So there may have been additional options, whether it was delaying the departure of the Air Force One that the president was not on and letting people know what the issue was. But certainly there were steps that needed to be taken to make sure everybody was in the loop as best they could. But at the end of the day, protecting the president is the job of the Secret Service.
What the duty to warn? What, there was a duty to warn anybody who may be in harm's way?
Basically, yes. Well, certainly civilians. If there's military folks on board, they may not have to be notified. I'm not positive what the ruling on that is. But if you have civilians, they're not, in any case, they're not allowed to be used as decoys for protection purposes.
Colonel Layden, as we said, the Washington Post reports the president was flying in an Air Force C-32A, which is a modified Boeing 757 normally used to transport government officials. Does that type of plane have the type of security upgrades and defensive countermeasures a traditional 747 Air Force One does? I can't imagine that it would.
Actually, it normally does not, Anderson. So that also raises some interesting questions, because a lot of our reporting concerning Air Force One, the new Air Force One, the old Air Force One, has been based on the security requirements that Air Force One normally brings with it, and also the capabilities, such as the defensive capabilities, as well as things like chaff and other capabilities that the Air Force One, at least in the past, has had. It also normally does not have aerial refueling capabilities, which is something the old Air Force One had. Seldom used, but definitely something that is good to have if the president is going to be in the air for an extended period of time.
Richard, does the effort the Secret Service went to in order to make it look like the president was on the former Air Force One, does that surprise you? I mean, have you seen something like this before?
It doesn't surprise me. Many of the Secret Service people I worked with and in joint operations as well, they uncover every possibility that they can do. I like the catering truck. When Caitlin brought up that they don't normally bring a catering truck to Air Force One, I thought that was interesting. So I'm sure some of the alert people on board thought something was a little unusual that day. But they are going to take every step they have to protect the president, no matter who that person is.
And Colonel Layden, if the C-32A was not using the Air Force One call sign, how many people do you think in the U.S. national security apparatus even knew the president was on that plane?
Very few people, Anderson, would be my guess in this particular case, because normally Air Force One is the call sign that is used when the president is on board a particular aircraft. And in this particular case, they used the call sign Reach 18. And that is a common call sign for military aircraft, U.S. military aircraft. So in this case, the deception was, all the way to include the call sign. And it would make sense in a case like this where there is a probable Iranian threat that could, be exercised through intelligence and their interception of communications. So this is something that showed the thoroughness of their preparation, at least in this instance.